What to do after snip, snip, snip. Okay. That's simple. That should be simple. Today's video is going to cover what to do after snip, snip, snip. It will cover options I think are strong and should be represented, and there are following extensions. Now, this is going to be a very thorough video, so I'm going to try my best to talk about everything I think is important to talk about. So get yourself maybe a cup of tea, maybe coffee if that's your thing, and just get like super comfortable because this is going to take me a moment. Now, you might be asking yourself right now, surely he doesn't mean he's going to go through all of the extensions of things he thinks are viable, because there's so many options to do during snip, snip, snip. And that would be crazy. And the answer is, yeah. Yeah, that would be crazy. Let's get started. Okay, you got snip, snip, snip. And at this point, you have four options, generally speaking. You could either go for an IAD, you could run up to the opponent, you could toss an item, or you could use your meter to convert it into a combo. IAD is one of the stronger options to go for after snip, snip, snip. To perform an instant air dash, hold up after the snip, 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 and tap your dash macro to get as fast as possible into the air dash animation. But what do you do from an air dash? Let's start with J.D. J.D seems like a very good way to start since it's a safe jump, it lights up the afro, and it starts your pressure. After a J.D on block, you can either go for an overhead using J.K. or J.D. You could go for a low using 2K or 2D. You could go for a close slash to establish more pressure, more risk on the opponent, build some meter for yourself. You could run up and snip them again, which is definitely an option. Or you could micro dash into close slash to get momentum on the close slash and be closer for the following mix-up, which would be a good way to counterplay FDing opponents. Or you could simply hit the opponent and then you just confirm a combo. Remember, this isn't optimal, just an example combo. Let's say you chose the J.D option. There are three major extensions to that situation. One, the opponent gets hit and you get a combo because it's an instant overhead. Two, the opponent doesn't get hit and you go for an air dash cancel. And three, the opponent doesn't get hit, but you go for a jump cancel. While mix, and love are possible cancels in that situation, I think they are not recommended unless you know for a fact you are countering a specific behavior from your opponent. If the opponent gets hit by the instant overhead, well, you know what to do. Confirm a combo. Remember, not optimal, just examples. And in case they block, let's go to the next extension. Starting with air dash. Air dash is a bit of a slow option since it opens you up to getting air grabbed or just anti-aired. If your opponent has good reactions, stay away from this option since it is relatively fake at higher levels. But if your opponent is caught sleeping, you can definitely take advantage of this reset and then continue your afro pressure with another mix or simply more pressure strings. If you go for air dash, to leave as little time for the opponent to react as possible, go with JP. You will hit the button 3 times to land yourself with nice plus frames. Against FDing opponents, using J.H to get a bit closer to them could prove beneficial. Also, if they're FDing, they're less likely to air grab you or to anti-air you. If you get a hit, confirm the combo. If they block the JPs or the J.H, you can reset your pressure. Two options are really strong in my opinion. Option number 1 is you'll go for a micro dash close slash into a mix-up, high-low. For the high, you'll do a micro dash close slash into J.D. And for the low, you'll do a micro dash close slash into a delay 2D. Make sure you delay it so you actually get the combo from the afro explosion and you time a real 50-50. If the J.D. or the 2D are blocked, you are capable of going for another strike throw afterwards with either close slash or snip, snip, snip after the afro explosion. you have time to run up and catch them, or to land from the JD and catch them. So both options are safe and very strong. In addition, from JD, you are capable of going to an air dash to cancel into JS J.H into close slash, all being a true string from the afro explosion, which is very strong, will build you meter and risk on the opponent. In the case of 2D, you are capable of tossing an item to either maintain your position both on hit or on block, or to just reset your pressure in case you got an item stored that can do that, or if you just get lucky. The only weakness to this part after the JPP is if you do microdash close slash, you can get back thrown. To counter that, we can do close slash immediately, and that will be our second option. If you follow up with close slash 2H immediately, you can either perform left-right using Scarecrow, which with meter can lead to devastating damage, or instead, you can opt for tossing an item and simply resetting your pressure, keeping the meter you built and the risk you built on the opponent, possibly resetting the situation. And that is the end of the line. Now we have to go back and wonder what happens if you jump after the JD on block. Jumping back after the JD is blocked is the safer option, and will let you counterplay your opponent if they do try to air grab you or just anti-air you. The options you have after the jump are as follows. Either landing using JP to stuff opponents trying to jump at you, using JH against passive opponents, or JK against opponents who wait right beside the landing point to either grab you or hit you when you recover. In addition, you could use Mix to land yourself down while also being safe due to the afro explosion being timed perfectly to cover for the Mix recovery. If you choose to land yourself using one of the buttons I mentioned earlier, you get a new chance to either toss an item safely due to the afro explosion covering you, or going for a left-right mix using Scarecrow. And that was everything I think you should know after JD safe jump into instant JD overhead. Okay, let's move to the next one. For a slightly smaller reward for an overhead, Faust can go for JK after JD. This option doesn't work on the entire cast. The following characters will not get hit by it. The first one being Faust, which also doesn't get hit by JD. Similarly to Jacko because of their unique crouch animation. But in addition to these two, the following characters will not get hit by JK. Anji Mito, Ram Lethal Valentine, Giovanna, May, and Bridget, which proves to all of us that Anji and Bridget are more girl characters than Milia and Ino could ever be. Choosing to go for JK over JD as an overhead puts you in a relatively similar situation. You're in the air, above your opponent, and he either blocked or got hit. The confirm is different since you're not lighting up the afro with JK. So let's go over our options to see what we can do. First of all, what happens when the opponent gets hit? The only way to combo from JK without meter is to go into J2K immediately and confirm the mix on crouching opponents. While this option leads to nice damage, as you can see, it is not very confirmable on hit, and you will have to commit to the J2K, which could be punishable, and lose your afro pressure. If you choose to not cancel the JK into J2K immediately, you still have options similar to the options you had when you pressed JD, where you could either air dash, you could jump cancel, or in the case of JK, since it has less recovery than JD, you could simply wait out the recovery, and with the threat of a late cancel, simply reset the situation with a landing JK, a landing JP, or something of the sort. Since the situations from jump and air dash are pretty much the same from JD, I will not cover them again, as to not waste more time in this video. But let's see what we do after pulling off a JK into another JK landing, for example. Doing a full block string with close/far/5H or close/far/2H into a Scarecrow left-right is a great option if you have meter to convert after the afro explosion. The other simpler option is just tossing an item at the end of that string and keeping your pressure. if you get the right item, or if you have the right item stored. Okay, now we covered overhead, and we can do lows now. I think we can do lows now. Lows are simple. Many strong players, when facing Faust and having the Afro on, will block overhead, is to avoid the Afro explosion combos, which deal a lot more damage than the low options. Being on top of your low options and dealing as much damage as you can from them, or the best pressure that you can from them, is very important for Afro pressure. Using a low option will help you target people who are either putting reversals in, trying to fuzzy jump to avoid Afro pressure, or maybe to try and air grab you from an error option. And also, it will be your mix to the overhead. 2K and 2D are the main lows you will use after a JD. Similarly to the JK and JD situations, 2K and 2D leave you in very similar situations, but with slightly different timings or slightly different options. I will go over the extensions of both of them, starting with 2K. There are two possible confirms you could do after 2K on hit. If you get a 2K and you confirm it into a 6P, you can get a full combo using the Afro Explosion and break in the wall. There are 3 strong options you could confirm into from 2K2D on hit. The first one being tossing an item or using a stored item to continue your pressure and trying to land another mix-up now timed with the Afro Explosion. Another option could be using item eat into a safe jump, which is a new option we got in Season 3. After using the safe jump, you'll be able to land another mix-up. For the overhead, do a tap down into a JP after the air dash. For the second option, the 2P, you can either do a JD safe jump into 2P or simply an empty safe jump into 2P. Both work. A bonus option you can utilize is going for a fake jump into SnipSnipSnip. The snip will combo into the explosion, and you can pick up if you're close enough to the wall with either 5P or 5K, depending on your timing. On a block 2K, you have a few options ahead of you. The first one being finishing the string into 2D, and then simply ending your pressure. You can then box your opponent and try to RPS with them to make use of the Afro Explosion, or simply toss an item near the Afro Explosion, so you can take advantage of it with an extra item. Option number 2 is resetting after the 2K into a close slash or a micro dash close slash, depending on if the opponent is FDing or not, doing a full string into either Scarecrow left right if you have meter to take advantage of it, or an item toss to reset the situation. If the opponent doesn't use faultless defense often, or is simply very passive on defense, which is very normal when Afro pressure is applied, it is possible to use the 2K into run-up snip, which will put you in a nice position to mix your opponent. The Afro will look like it's going to explode right as they wake up, but in actuality, it's going to explode right on their last invuln frames, which is going to let you put a snip in, possibly to reset the situation, or simply do a normal safe jump. Using other buttons after 2K is definitely an option, but all of these will more rely on your opponent's behavior than just being good flowcharts during Afro pressure. So you can keep an eye out for them if you think they're going to be helpful, but don't use them as layer 1. Also remember, resets that do not include microdashes will be weak to FDing opponents, so use them very carefully, so you don't end up whiffing a JD. So now after we covered 2K on block, on hit, and the different extensions you have from 2K, we can now talk about 2D, which as I said is going to be very similar to 2K. So now, if you hit your 2D, you can very similarly to 2K set up a safe jump using item eat into a safe jump, and set up a 50-50 to get a nice piece of damage on your opponent. After you set up the safe jump, you can either use J.H or J.D as your safe jump buttons, and set up a low using 2K, or going for an overhead using J.D. If you do a fake safe jump into SnipSnipSnip, you can now combo even more easily into the Afro Explosion due to the different timing. After 2D on hit, you can also confirm into mix. You'll have to hold 6 for it to properly work on your opponent without dropping them from the mix OTG. After that, you can set up a close slash into a high-low situation, using either delay JD or 5D. You can also use JD if you prefer it, but 5D is definitely better. The last option, which I do not recommend too highly, but it is the most fun one, is to simply just toss an item and do some item shenanigans. You can abuse the Afro Explosion in order to take control of a Trumpet, chain it into a Meteor, or maybe help it set a mini Faust toss. And as for 2D on block, well, that's pretty much the end of the line. You can choose to RPS and try to maybe charge thrust, or try to far slash afterwards, maybe even air dash. You can run up and try to mix them, but at that point it's just RPS and it will depend on the behavior of your opponent and the matchup itself. I think the main thing you want to keep in mind, outside of the fact that I changed multiple shirts during this video and likely will continue to do so, is that when a string is over, like at the end of 2K2D or just 2D or close slash far slash 5H, whatever it is, you don't have to RPS. You could, but you don't have to RPS. If you can be in a position where you can use the Afro Explosion, you are still in an advantageous situation. You don't want to risk being thrown or getting a hard knockdown by a 6B counter hit, because then you're losing the advantage you gain with the Afro you risk so much for. So just keep that in mind. We did the high, we did the low. What's left? And surely all of you smart viewers asking right now, what's the point of doing a close slash if we're already getting mixed without the close slash? Good question. There are several reasons I would like you to keep in mind for why to use close slash during your Afro pressure. The first one is fairly simple. It builds more risk on the opponent, meaning your hits deal more damage, while also building you more meter for your pressure, which means you're more likely to have meter to either convert into supers or cover a bad overhead that might be punishable, or whatever you're doing, you're safer because you have more meter, or you could save it for after the pressure and maybe try to reset the situation with another snip. Whatever you want to do, the meter is there for you, so meter is good. The second reason that close slash is good is since close slash is an extremely versatile tool. It can be dash cancel, jump cancel, canceled into several buttons, lows, overheads, right? All these things are available to you, making the mix there and the mental stack even greater. And also lets you run the strike throw game while also doing the high-low game from close slash. So close slash is very, very nice for all these things. In addition, close slash will auto-confirm your J.D on hit into, well, a high damaging combo, because close slash is our best pickup there. So you can keep all these things in mind. I use close slash quite a bit. I think it's one of the stronger options we can use because of how much control it gives you. It lets you also react to an opponent doing FD, and we're going to cover like what do you do if the opponent does FD, well, what's good counterplay. So we're going to cover everything, but overall, very strong tool. Since close slash is a true string, normally a hit there will be a counter hit. But here are two confirms you can do in case close slash does get a hit. Now back to close slash on block. So firstly, we go into our layer 1, canceling close slash into the high-low, either J.D or a slightly delayed 2D so they hit on the same frame. Remember, this does not work on Faust and it does not work on Jacko. Everybody else, you're clear to go. Kill him. And if the J.D is blocked, well, you already know what to do. Generally speaking, almost every setup is the same, with one difference that I'm going to show in a moment. So the air dash works the same. If you do the jump cancel into the mix, works the same. But doing the jump cancel into the landing buttons will put you in a position to immediately go for the left-right or for the item toss, while before you had to do a far slash before to auto time it. While I do not recommend using close slash JK, it does confirm the same way as JK would otherwise. So if you do want to go for it, you can just do the same confirms we did earlier or the same routes on block that we did earlier. The reason I dislike JK is due to its bad confirms on hit, in addition to the confirm being very dangerous on block without meter. So I'd say stick to the JD, but if you really want to go for it, this is how you deal with JK on block or on hit. Now let's talk about the low part of the mix. When you start with close slash, the only low you can go into is 2D. Now, you could go into 2H, but I heavily recommend against it, since it is relatively punishable and leaves you pretty vulnerable. 2D is a relatively safe button and can lead into nice mix-ups on hit. You will either confirm 2D on hit into a mix, and then you'll perform a high-low using either 2D, 5D, or a J.D. Or you could also do an item eat into a safe jump situation, which leads to a high-low with 2P or JK. Remember, you can also use a jump into JPP in order to mix up your opponent's timing and catch fuzzying opponents. And if the 2D is blocked, well, you're playing the same game as 2D on block earlier. You're trying to box your opponent and using the Afro Explosion to the best of your ability to continue your pressure, build meter, or toss an item. Fun fact, with the addition of Charge Thrust this season, you can do 2D into Charge Thrust on block into the left-right Scarecrow. Hey poser, nice shirt, I hear you saying. Didn't you say Close Slash is a very flexible tool and there's a lot of options? Isn't this just the same high-low? You're right. Strap in, we have a lot of options to cover. Close Slash into Close Slash is another way to re-establish pressure, especially against a fleeing opponent who are trying to push you out, using the little time they're giving you to run back in. And also, of course, against Jacko and Faust, who don't really hold the overhead. This option does not have a lot of mix, but it does build a lot of risk on the opponent and re-establishes your pressure with an item, or if you do have meter, you can actually go for the left-right and get some really nice damage. If you are willing to use Wild Assault for your pressure, Close Slash into Close Slash 6H Wild Assault will lead into the left-right where you don't have to spend meter for the combo, which is pretty great. Against non-fleeing opponent, Close Slash Far Slash 5H into Wild Assault will still work and will lead to this devastating damage. Credit to ZX for posting the tech on Twitter. Of course, after the second Close Slash, the high-low is still available to you, so you can always go for a JD or for a delay 2D. The situation on block of course changes a bit, and this is how you adapt to it. JD into immediate mix mix mix, or JD to jump cancel J2K mix 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 are both nice frame traps that will leave you very plus for a strike throw game. Bonus meme, if you do JD into mix mix mix, you can go for a charge thrust to really fuck with your opponent. If you cancel into an air dash, you now get a high-low using the JPPP or JPP into 2P. Against opponents who simply sit and block, a Close Slash JD into false snip is a nice way to open them up. And now for the low. When you do Close Slash 2D, on hit it's not too impressive. It basically leads into the same situation as a normal 2D on hit, because the Afro is going to explode right before they wake up. You can use this to get a cheeky snip, so you can kind of play with the ambiguity of the Afro explosion. But generally speaking, just tossing an item or going for normal safe jump is perfectly fine. On block, like all 2Ds on block, you'll box your opponent and repeat after me. Try to use the Afro Explosion to the best of your ability. Using Far Slash to auto-time a left-right or an item toss is perfectly fine. You could also do safer things just like waiting the Afro Explosion out and looking for your opponent. If you cancel 2D into Charge Thrust, you are capable of linking the explosion with the Charge Thrust Guard Crush. And now, after we mental stack the opponent up to the roof, we can start inputting Air Dash from our Close Slash. From the Air Dash, you'll go into JPP, and you can go into immediate high-low with 2K or JD, but you could also do a Close Slash 2D for a low, and Close Slash left-right with Scarecrow. The timing is very strict, so make sure your strings are tight. For an overhead, you can use JK, but only against the characters it works against. JD is simply too slow to hit on time. So we already checked what happens after the high-low, and we also checked what happens after Close Slash Dagger Close Slash. Now, you could do other staggers as well, but we're not going to go into them. What's left is to check what happens if you immediately air dash, what if you jump cancel, and also what happens if you just finish the string. If you choose to go for the air dash after close slash, you can go into JPP, then close slash 2H wild assault to auto time the left right, and also confirm a combo that will deal quite a bit of damage. If you don't have Wild Assault available, or if you prefer to keep it, you can go for close slash 6H after JPP to auto time left right. This will require a meter though. Of course, any of these options on block can be cancelled into an item toss just as well. After the same close slash, you can get a snip that will combo on explosion. Timing the high-low will take some practice, as it is a manual timing, and you don't want to get back from right at the end of your afro pressure, so make sure you practice it and get it properly. If the people you're playing against are known back throw mashers, make sure to use J.D over 5D. Jump canceling the close slash is a way to reset your offense in a way that will keep you close to the opponent for a nice high-low or left-right right as the afro explodes, while also building a lot of risk on the opponent, making the combo very devastating. Comboing off the snip explosion is a bit difficult in this route, but it is possible. While overhead can be performed with JK, I recommend using the 5D. It is a better auto time, leads to better damage, and JK can whiff against a lot of opponents. In order to do the left-right mix using Scarecrow after the jump cancel reset, you can either use meter, in which case you'll use jump cancel reset J.H. into micro dash close slash 5H, keep it very tight so you don't trigger left-right protection, and then you'll do Scarecrow K. You can then PRC to combo or red RC after you hit with the Scarecrow, whichever one you prefer. The other method uses Wild Assault and will do one button, can be close slash 5H, whatever you prefer. 5H I think works the best as it pushes the opponent the furthest. And then you will use Wild Assault into immediate Scarecrow K. This will lead to very high damage, so you're very welcome to try and use it. The other jump preset you can use is a delay J.D. The reason to do a delay J.D. is some people could use some fuzzy timings, or maybe they're trying to reversal, and that way you can block the reversal or catch their fuzzy options. In addition, it's a good way to rack up more damage instead of going for the low to open up the opponent. To perform the left-right, with meter you'll do a close slash 6H into Scarecrow K, and with Wild Assault you'll simply do a 5H into Wild Assault Scarecrow K. This will also work if you're being FD'd out. You will substitute the close slash 6H with a micro dash far slash 5H, and then Scarecrow K. And lastly, I'm going to mention the option to simply finish the string from close slash. Far slash 5H or far slash 2H into charge thrust or an item toss are okay ways to finish your string. They will lead to either plus frames with an item or just a chained guard crush for you to play off of. Yeah, it is a new shirt. Get over it. Okay, so we've done almost everything you could possibly want to do from J.D. The only thing that's left, since we did strike, is the throw. Despite the heavy risks that come with using Snip during your afro pressure, in addition to the fact that you don't get to reset your afro pressure, but you have to keep going with the same afro timer, there are benefits to using Snip during afro pressure. The first one is simply opening up your opponent a bit more, forcing them to make more mistakes and to jump or backdash to try to fight the snip. The other benefit is against characters with DPs or Baikon's parry, Anji parry for example. Using snip will beat those options and will force them to think twice before they use them, making the rest of your Afro pressure a bit better. After J.D into snip, you have the option to go into high-low, as we did earlier with MP2P or JPP. In addition, you could just go for another snip that will combo into the explosion. If your opponent is FDing, this will still work, but you have to make sure your timing is very tight. Another benefit of using snip is it will discourage people from mashing back throw, which could maybe benefit you in the long run. To top off the J.D section of the video, I'd like you to learn how you do a backdash OS. Now this is a bit more advanced and you don't have to do it all the time, but against backdash heavy opponents, this could be very useful. So first of all, how do you even check if you're doing it right? Set your bot to randomly do things in Oki, where one option is backdash and the other is blocking. If the opponent backdashes, your 5k will come out, catch them during the backdash, which you can then go into J.D to confirm a full combo, or simply to reset your situation on Oki. If the opponent will block, despite me inputting the 5k, as you can see, the 5k will not come out, and you can continue your pressure in one of the many ways that we've shown in this video. Beginner players can completely ignore this, but picking this up later is definitely beneficial to your play, and you can input it even once in a while to make sure you're stopping backdash heavy opponents. Now, I'd like to add a caveat to this entire video. Afro pressure can always resort to freestyling. You don't have to do anything. In fact, sometimes it's even good to go out of the boundaries of what is layer 1 or normal or whatever. But with that said, I do want you to know the skeleton, the structure that you could use, so you could rely on it whenever you want to either autopilot, or if you want to have something more solid because it seems your opponent is escaping your Afro pressure all the time. With that said, I think you know everything you need to know about Safe Jump J.D in Afro pressure, which means you're ready to go to the next part of the video. Before we continue, I'd like you to ask yourself a question. Are you in your opponent's head yet? If so, now's the time. Snip into snip is not too complicated. It's a reset, puts you in the same position you were when you got the first snip, and it has one very nice benefit of beating DPs. So, if your opponent really likes to DP or C, or if you really want to get in their head and make them do mistakes, here's your way. Another tool to get in your opponent's head is using cross-up mix. Cross-up mix can be used without Afro, but with Afro it's even more potent, making it harder to avoid by crouching, dashing out of it, or 6Ping, or anti-airing with whatever disjoint you have. And you're just less likely to whiff it, since it's easier to time. While you can use cross-up mix at any point in the screen, using it when your back is closer to the wall will make it more effective at pushing the opponent into the wall. If you want to retain the Afro and continue with Afro pressure, simply close slash OTG into a safe jump, J.D. If you really want to piss them off, you can always go for another cross-up mix. Remember, Afro has only 10 hit points, meaning on the 10th hit, it will disappear if you didn't ignite it. Meaning, if you want to get the Afro pressure after the second cross-up mix, you'll have to do a run-up, wake up J.D. Keep in mind that cross-up mix is always punishable by the opponent, so use it with caution, or with meter. Better with meter. While JP can be used as a safe jump, it is generally not recommended and is mostly used only to tick throw the opponent. JP is especially good at that since it can also work against FDing opponents. And the last option for in your head category from IAD will be the empty jump low. For empty jump low, you'll simply hold it down input while air dashing and then press JD at the end, then immediately press 2P 6P. While 2K is better on block and on hit, 2K does give the opponent more time to react to the block stun from the first hit, which is a mid. That's why I think you should use 2P if you're trying to mix your opponent. If you are willing to commit Wild Assault, it will let you pressure the opponent if they do block it and keep your Afro pressure very strong, while on hit, it will confirm into a combo that will let you keep your Afro for after the wall break. If you have Super or another Wild Assault, you could even do a hard knockdown into guaranteed Afro pressure. Remember that after a wall break hard knockdown, you don't get the same distance as an Afro safe jump, so you can't use the usual pressure that we have, but the ignite is guaranteed. Today's shirt is Cowboy Bebop meets Pulp Fiction, and this section was the gimmick section, or the cheeky options to open up your opponent section after an IAD. Now, while these options may be more gimmicky or dangerous to use, doesn't mean that they're bad. They are important to represent so your opponent makes more mistakes when they're thinking about them. It will make your normal JD safe jumps even stronger. With that kept in mind, there is one more option I think you should know how to use from an IAD. This option is J.H, and it's a bit more freeform than J.D, as it doesn't light up the Afro, so it doesn't set a timer on your offense. There are two different types of IAD J.H after SnipSnipSnip. One can only be performed in a corner, /OTG into IAD J.H, and that one is the strong one we want to use. The other one, in mid-screen, is a bit more tricky due to it not being auto-timed. Another use for J.H is to delay it even more in order to catch people OSing the cross-up mix. You can try this yourself by setting the bot to block meaty for the correct side and then immediately switch blocking to the other side. And now the important question is, why should we use J.H? If J.D is so good and it starts so many layers of offense, what's the point of using J.H? Since J.H has a higher attack level than J.D, it often leaves you more plus, and is very good against FDing opponents who are trying to get you out of your pressure. In addition, your JK fuzzies will become stronger now since JD will actually light the Afro up and give you a combo, giving the confirm much easier and much stronger. Another benefit of JH is since you didn't light up the Afro, the opponent will be expecting you to do the overhead. That can either make your reset stronger with close/staggers, it could make your grab stronger, so you could just go for another grab immediately after JH, or you could just go for the low, and then if you confirm into 2D, you could go for another safe jump with item eat into safe jump JD, and then light up the Afro. When you're using JH safe jump, one thing you really want to keep in your mind is that Afro can be hit, or the opponent can sustain up to 10 blocks till the Afro disappears. By the 10th hit, you want to use your JD to light up the Afro and start your Afro pressure, whatever it may be. So just try to keep that in mind. Try to keep count of the hits that you gave, or if you do get a hit, maybe try to route into a safe jump JD so you can start Afro pressure all over again. J's safe jump will leave you in a similar position to JD, but without the timer, meaning the JKJD versus 2K2D high-low mix-up still applies, and the close/snip strike throw also still applies. It just plays out differently in the extensions. Let's start with JK and JD and see what they route up to. On hit, both will reward you with a very nice combo. You have a lot of time to confirm due to the JD explosion, so just take your time and grab as much damage as you can. If you preemptively jumped because it's part of your pressure or because you're trying to bait a burst or anything like that, you can always save your combo using a landing JH into 5k mix. Now since JK routes into JD on block and on hit, we only have to learn what to do after JD gets blocked to learn how to deal with both situations, JD and JK. That's gonna save us some nice time. Just like the first part, after JD on block, you have two main options. One is to dash cancel and the second is to jump cancel. Special cancels are not very recommended as both of them are punishable and will ruin your Afro pressure if they are punished. In addition, air dash can be air grabbed, but most players do not react in time, making it an option you could definitely use even in high level. With that said, let's start with air dash. After the air dash as usual, you'll perform a JPPP, and after that, you can either use a string with close/far/5H into either left, right, or very plus item toss, or if you have Wild Assault available, you can go to close/6H Wild Assault into the Scarecrow left, right, which is very strong. Of course, after the JPs into close slash, you can route into the high-low as well. So you could go for JK, J2K into mix to confirm the combo, which will also be safe on block due to the Afro Explosion. Or you could go for the low either with 2D, which will then not lead to big reward, but lead into a safe jump or into item Oki. Or you could also use 2K after a close slash in order to catch the opponent blocking overhead and get a nice combo. As for the jump cancel, your main priority is coming down safely without getting air thrown or anti-aired on your way down. You will use J.H against passive opponents, J.P against opponents who are trying to jump against you, and J.D or J.K against opponents who are trying to stay where you're going to land, so they're dash blocking into your landing. Once you landed safely, there are two options. One, the opponent didn't block the move you did while you were landing, meaning you are not plus and you are simply trying to box your opponent in and waiting for the Afro Explosion to go back in to apply even more pressure. Option number two is the opponent actually did block one of your moves landing, and now you're very plus and you could go for either another mix-up between high and low, you could maybe force a left-right using Scarecrow, or just go for a toss that will be very plus. Remember, J.H is a more free-form type of Afro pressure, and to use it to the best of your ability, you'll have to have a very good inner clock on when the Afro is actually about to explode. So if you want to time that left-right, or if you want to time a very nice slow into Afro Explosion, you'll have to work on it and make sure you practice the timings. Beautiful. And now we're moving to the lows. Post J.H, 2K will be the main low you'd use. 1, because it's fast, and 2, because since the Afro is not lit, there is no reason to try and time specific mix-ups with 2D. To combo, you have two options. 1, combo into 6B, breaking the wall, getting positive, but losing your Afro pressure due to the amount of hits. Option number 2 is using 2D into item eat safe jump, which will then lead into a J.D igniting the Afro and starting the Afro pressure we already learned in the first part. Side note, if you confirm 2K6B into a Wild Assault, you can still break the wall and keep your Afro pressure. I only recommend this option if you have another Wild Assault or Super to break the wall, to guarantee the Afro ignition. On block, you have two options, generally speaking. The first one being, you do 2K2D, you end your string, and then you try to box your opponent and catching them with a J.D to light up the Afro before it goes away. Option number 2 is using Wild Assault, which can guarantee you an air dash into J.H true string, or you could also go for a J.D, which is technically not true string, but very dangerous to press on. Whether you choose J.H or J.D, you simply continue your pressure based on the elements we already learned with J.H safe jump and J.D safe jump on Afro. Okay, high-low check. Now time for the strike throw. And this one should be pretty simple. If you do J.H into grab, you're simply resetting the situation, applying a new Afro since the Afro was not lit, and getting into another position to do a safe jump, either with J.D, J.H, or whatever you want really. And now close slash. Once the opponent blocks close slash, you have a lot of options in front of you, similar to the J.D situation. Let's go over them real quick. You can do JK, J.D, or just J.D, and we already know what to do after these on block. You could do 2D, and we already know what to do after that one as well. While an air dash is an option, I really recommend against it, as the Afro is not lit and you don't really have any way to protect yourself if you fuck up. Since the afro is not ignited, finishing the string from close slash or using stagger options with par slash and 5H is not very recommended, as it loses the benefit of the afro explosion. Since the opponent has an afro, they will most likely not be mashing, which will make the jump cancel pretty strong. In addition, a delay J.D can beat a lot of anti-air options, which leaves us with jump canceling. Jump canceling into delayed options can be very strong, as it is safer than simply doing close slash into J.D immediately, and can also lead to the reset with C.S J.H. When a delay J.D is blocked, you can simply treat it as a safe jump J.D. For most cases, the timings will be very similar. If you are afraid of dropping a left-right, it is easier to go for item toss enders. So I wanted to do a brief summary of where we're at because I spent so much time talking about IADs and J.D, and I said there's 4 main things 40 minutes ago. I said there's 4 main things you want to know when you're doing a successful snip. Well, the truth is 90+% of the time, you're going to do an IAD. And out of that, like big percentage, 90+% of the time, you're going to do J.D, which is why I spent so much time talking about J.D specifically out of an IAD. Okay? Now, other things you're going to do are going to benefit from the knowledge we have covered here from J.H and J.D. So they're going to benefit from them. You'll see they'll be way shorter to cover. But I thought it was very important I'll present J.D and J.H first, because they are the main things you want to do and the most consistent things that I'd suggest you master first. Okay, with that said, we're going to move to the next few steps that I covered, right? In the beginning, I said there's like IAD, running up to your opponent, tossing an item, converting with meter. There's also close slash OTG technically, but it's part of like IADs mostly. So I'll cover that too. Alright, so with that said, back to the video. There's not a lot left, don't worry, okay? Stick to it. That was a really nice shirt. With that said, let's cover 2 scenarios from close slash OTG, which are fairly useful, and then move on to the next step, the big step, just running up to your opponent after a snip. The first option is close slash into charge thrust, or close slash into car charge thrust to be a bit closer to the opponent. This will hit the opponent on the 3rd frame of their wake up, meaning Souls 5k or Chips 5p can trade with it. The reason to use this is that it will have a more ambiguous timing for the high-low. This situation can be treated very similarly to a J.H safe jump or the IAD J.H, but since you're further from the opponent, the stagger options or the run-up close slash is a bit weaker. It will take longer for you to get a close slash on the opponent, so the gap in your offense will be bigger. In exchange for that, since you are very plus and the guard crush is in effect, there is no YRC coming, and going for a forward jump into J.D to light up the afro and continue your pressure is a very nice option. The downside to this is that against reversals like DPs or against Biken's parry, for example, this will lose, so use it carefully. Against Jacko and Faust, who don't get hit by the rising J.D, it is probably better to always go for the J.D and not use these more gimmicky options, so keep that in mind. Car charge thrust will also be hit by parry, so the only way to beat it is to delay the charge thrust or go for option number 2. Close slash OTG and to jump cancel love. Jump cancel love is a very nice way to beat out both parries, Biken and Anji's, in a very strong way, while still lighting up the afro if they do choose to block. This option can be treated as a slightly worse J.D, which is why generally speaking, we'll do J.D if they have no parry. As far as routing on block goes, this is basically the same as J.D, but since you're further from the opponent, you cannot get these like instant close slash into high-low. You'll have to do a dash up first, which will open a gap. With this option, you have to make sure to not jump too high, so you're not minus on your love or that you're not plus enough, but also not jump too low, so you have to block love and basically lose your pressure. As you can see, routing on block is similar to IAD J.D on block. Against Anji, we get a devastating punish. Land into close slash, into a full combo to break the wall. If you have Wild Assault, you can even guarantee the J.D to light up the afro. Note that due to the amount of hits, super wall break will not keep the afro. And now on the 50-minute mark, we're finally ready to move on. So now we're going back to square one. You landed a snip. Run up to the opponent? Why? Alright, so let me start by saying, I don't normally use this. Outside of beating Anji and Baiken parries mid-screen, this has very limited use. But it does have use. So let's go over it. So first, let's cover Baiken and Anji. Against Anji, you can simply run up, do the J.D, and as you can see, after a jump, you can punish his parry super. Against Baiken, you'll have to delay the J.D slightly to not get parried. Also, because of her silly hurtbox, you'll have to practice the timing. But otherwise, not bad. Okay, now back to beating non-cringe characters. Your main options from the run-up are either to go for a low using 2K, going for the overhead using J.D, or going for the strike throw with close slash and snip to reset the situation. Basically, you're left in the same position as post J.H. But all IAD options have a weakness where if they get IBFD'd, deflect shielded, or simply if the opponent is willing to put a lot of meter into FDing you out, you are put in a bad position to either mix them or to enforce strike throw. For the price of not being safe to reversals, the run-up options do not have this weakness, and you can still enforce the high-low with 2D and J.D, and also be close enough to enforce strike throw after lows like 2K. Your J.D actually becomes even safer because of the pushback of deflect shield or IBFD. But other than that, you're basically left in the same position as post J.H. You are plus, and you are looking to either burn the afro or reset them through the low and the grab. Hit that converted to 2D will go into a safe jump J.D that will light up the afro, and if you choose to go overhead, you will do J.D into either an air dash or a jump back. You see how simple everything is? We only needed to establish the J.D safe jump situation and the J.H safe jump situation to cover everything, right? Because it's either the afro is on fire or it isn't on fire. Okay, so let's move on to the third step. Item toss. And the first thing we should always ask ourselves before doing anything is, what is it good for? Items introduce more variables for the opponents to deal with. Now granted, a bad pull could lead to bad results, but good pulls could lead into very interesting results which your opponent may not be able to deal with. But more importantly, especially when you're low on your health, items can deal more safely with situations such as the PRC, parry RC, super PRC, or when the opponent has 100 meter, super into RC, especially ones like May that introduce a mix-up in addition to it. So, item toss. Starting with when to use. Using it in the corner is probably a bad idea since you are left -2. Despite not being in throw range, a good mash could definitely beat you without the right item. So this is generally more used in mid-screen. Let's go over each toss and see what you can do with each. Starting with bomb. The general idea when you have bomb is either to use the bomb to light up the afro or to use the bomb to cover for your gap in the strings. Investing your Wild Assault can guarantee pretty scary strings with a lot of places to mix up the opponent. The key for good bomb play is to simply have the timer of the bomb down, using it to your advantage, and remember, since your opponent is not as prepared as you are, you could use it to make the opponent block more than they have to. 100-weight ton is one of the best items to get in this situation. Remember, you're throwing items because you're afraid of your opponent's options, and weight will simply check them into another hard knockdown. If they do super, boom. If they do some sort of parry, boom. If they do nothing, they block their guard crush, and you can just light up the afro. After a weight toss, check in the opponent with either 2P, 5K, or simply one of your rising overheads. All good ways to get in a good position and light up the afro. But I think the best option in this situation is to usually just jump. Either jump or super jump, both giving great options. A short delay to block to make sure you're not getting hit by any supers, reversals, or whatever, and to delayed air dash can lead to a very strong situation. A jump back into Air Dash J.D will leave you in a pretty similar situation to the J.D safe jump, and will avoid people going for air grab. You can also fake the J.D and set up a real strike throw with close slash and snip, which will beat free frame buttons. The timing is not the easiest, so you can practice it if you want. But the cheesiest thing you can do off of this jump into air dash is to go for a mix cross up without the left right protection due to blocking the weight. Free wall break. In super jump heights, things are a bit simpler. You can either go for love to connect into the weight, and then either go for a string from it with your plus frames, or go into some mix. You can do whatever you want. You can finish on item toss. Or you could go for a connection with either J.D or J.H. A lot of like error options you can go for. You can even go for cross-up mix. Just make sure you practice the timing, since most of these things are not auto-timed. They're still very strong, so I recommend learning them just for some variety in your offense. Banana and Donut are bad pulls in this situation, but a funny interaction with Banana Peel and Scarecrow K. Afro is another bad pull, so we can skip this one too. Meteors are always a good pull for Oki. Using a Franklin like this, you can set up a really nasty left-right. You could also use the same jump we used before for the weight to actually get a left-right with the air dash. The combos don't do as much damage because of the meteor scaling, but it's a strong way to open up your opponent. You can also try to open up your opponents with double JP or going into low. Or play around with more funky options like whatever this is, where JP hits same side but the momentum makes it a left-right. But you can always just let the meteors go and block and then take your turn from a very strong guard crush. Mini Faust is another jackpot pull, since it will combo with you if you do hit your mix, but it will also cover you when your mix fails. There are too many variables to cover with Mini Faust, but generally speaking, you'll try to use them to cover for your Afro burning attempt, either waiting for the stump to occur to go into an air dash JD, or simply going for the JD as the stump occurs for it to cover you and you can jump off to safety or continue into an air dash. While Trumpet may be a bad pull, if you know how to RPS for it and how to convert off it, you can create some insane block strings that will lead to max risk or draining your opponent's FD bar, and can lead to a few mixes using the Afro explosion as well. Due to the hammer's arc, usually it won't hit your opponent unless the opponent approaches you, but that means you can go for more unsafe options, such as going for a J2K with the hammer cover, or going for a 5K jump cancel so you can light up the Afro safely with the hammer cover. Remember, and this is true for almost all items, that your opponent can always choose to disengage with a backdash if they are mid-screen. If that happens, you'll have to chase them down into the Afro. Neutral is still good for you because the Afro is still on, but you are struggling more to get that Afro pressure going. And that's it. We're at the fourth step. If you made it all the way here, good job. You know a lot about Afro pressure, hopefully. I gave you something to think about or to use in your games. And yeah, I think now it's time to go into the last step, which is converting with meter. Now, generally speaking, I only recommend converting with meter if you're trying to kill your opponent or put them in this kind of checkmate situation where they're like super low health and you can like one poke or a bit of chip will kill them. So that's general tip, but sometimes some people prefer taking the combo, getting like some more damage on the opponent. Maybe the neutral is fine and they don't want to go for a mix, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're wondering why I always end my videos on combos, I think that generally speaking, Managing to learn combos is way easier than learning pressure sequences and implementing them in a game. It's way easier to practice doing combos than doing a pressure sequence. So I want to leave you guys with something that you feel like you could immediately improve on. And you can work on the rest of things, you know, as you go, as you practice everything else. So with that said, let's go into the last section of this video, which is combos. If you want to convert from snip, snip, snip into a combo, I believe you should achieve one of the two things, either a wall break or killing your opponent. So let's make sure we always do that whenever we convert. In addition, using Faust RC will always be preferred. Normally, to start your combos, you route into Faust RC close / J.D or into Faust RC drift up J.D. Faust RC drift up J.D is pretty tricky to burst since you have two hits that are guaranteed on the opponent, the J.D and the Afro Explosion. Being a good way to finish off an opponent is pretty low. In the corner, this route becomes even more potent at burst baiting and finishing the combo. Use close slash for easier, more consistent combos that deal slightly more damage on average. If you want to utilize item ETH, you can route this way instead of the other combos. Another way to be more burst safe is to utilize Wild Assault during your combos. This can lead to wall breaks that still keep the Afro with several hits left. Mid-spring Wild Assault combos are a bit more technical, but there is a lot of value to learning them since they cannot be bursted for long periods of time, guaranteeing you a lot of damage. In the corner, the combo is even simpler, requires less hits, leaving you with more hits for the Afro after the wall break. Using fast Wild Assault and not the charged version can lead to a side switch after snip, if you do it properly. This can be very beneficial when your back is closer to the wall. If your back is really touching the wall, you can go for a super simple and short combo, break the wall and keep the Afro. If you have no access to Wild Assault or if you prefer not using it, you can go with the Meteor routes as well. These routes are a bit technical, so make sure you practice them before. If you're too far from the wall and you have no Wild Assault to side switch, you can use this combo to break the wall. It leaves just one hit for the Afro, so you can try a J.D. When you have your opponent cornered, going for the Faust RC combo deals basically the same damage, but you can do this one if you want to do it. And that's it. I gave a really good push towards the end so I could keep the same shirt for 2 clips in a row. And yeah, we covered all the 4 big options that you should know after snip, snip, snip that I mentioned an hour ago. You know what to do in every single one now. Let's do a quick recap summary so you have everything kind of in your head in like a short, concise manner, okay? Option number 1, IAD. It leads to J.D, which is your main bread and butter option. It sets up the Afro on fire, it's a safe jump, it's auto-timed, it is super strong, it is very simple to perform, and it leads to your strongest offensive patterns with a lot of layers and variations. Option number 2 there, after IAD, you can get into your opponent's head using either cross-up mix, using lows, using tick throws with JP into throw. You can go into empty J.D into throw. All of them strong options. They will force your opponents to make more mistakes, even if they do carry some risks with them. You can use J.H to extend and get more meter or build more risk on your opponent. Meanwhile, you keep your Afro Explosion for later, setting a bit different, more flexible offense that requires more improvisation and noticing whatever happens at every single point. So less structured, but has some benefits. you can get around options like parry, DPRC, or some super PRC options using either items or run-up options to delay your timings and mess up with your opponent's defense. All good. And lastly, you can kill your opponent or get positive bonus in Season 3, which is super good. Using meter after grab, you can break the wall from anywhere on the screen using the routes that we showed, getting significant damage and sometimes being able to kill your opponent. And that's it. Hopefully this video was helpful for whoever is still watching. If you made it this far, I assume that it was working for you and it's helping you. So I'm glad for that. And thanks for watching. I guess I got nothing more to say. I said everything I know about Afros, I think. Like, see you on the next one. Bye-bye.